Hello, my name is Father Moss, and we're covering the English Reformation and more broadly, the Catholic Church in England through its whole history. And, I started with all the way back to King Arthur, the legendary, and he truly was just a legend, um, through all the different things like uh, sending the St. Augustine to Canterbury, or Kent at that time, to uh, preach the good word to the Celtic people and also the Anglo-Saxons. And so we've gone through all of these steps in the development of Christianity. And the thing is that if you ever read a book, and you probably won't because it's a mile long, it's so big. It's like 2 inches thick. It's called Stripping of the Altars by Eamon Duffy. And it outlines what the Catholic Church was before the Reformation. And the Catholic Church was in very good shape, was very devout, and it was very disciplined, and they didn't have any scandals or anything. The scandals were all on the part of the hierarchy and the kings. They were very scandalous, but the church was doing very well in England, and the people were very devout. And I did mention that England was given over to Mary as her dowry, and to this day, English Catholics take great pride in England being the dowry of Mary. There are a lot of Marian shrines, and more than 50% of all the Catholic churches name Mary the Virgin. All of those churches that used to be Catholic are now Church of England churches, but and a lot of Marian shrines. So they take great, and they pray. They take great pride in being the dowry of Mary, and they also pray for the renewal of the Catholic Church in England, which I think is a really nice idea. We should be praying for the revival of the church in the United States as well. It's nice, simple prayer. They have a very beautiful written prayer. Somebody who is skilled could write a beautiful written prayer for us as well. But anyway, I came all the way up to the revival of the Catholic Church in England because the, um, the Catholic Emancipation Act took place in 1829, and the Catholics were given a lot of their rights back again, and things began to do much better for the church. And then the church was filling up with people coming in because of the Irish were coming in large numbers, and talk about pennies for the poor. They were a penny, literally a penny at a time, building up the most beautiful Catholic churches ever. So and a lot of centered in London and Liverpool, where my grandmother comes from, and where we have a couple English Irish ladies in the parish. That's where they're from too. So, but anyway. So things, and I did mention before that during the war, Catholic chaplains were really noble ministers of the wounded and the suffering soldiers on the battlefield, because as you know, World War One was terrible. It was a terrible war where people were killed, 60,000 in one day, with trench warfare and all of that. It was just awful. And the sorrow of the people of England, was just great sorrow. And then during the 1940s, then they had the Nazis bombing London as well. But the chaplains were at the front. Interestingly, the Church of England ministers never went, until much later. They kind of got shamed or embarrassed that the Catholic chaplains were doing all this work and they were not. But the Anglican clergy didn't have. If you've ever read any of the stories of Jane Austen, if you like that, I've read parts of it, but it's very girly stuff. So I haven't read much, but they all talk about the pastors, the Anglican pastors, and they were such bimbos, and just silly men who just were very greedy and would grab the money meant for the poor, the tithes and things, and enrich themselves and living in these Georgian mansions and so forth, and living a high life at the expense of the poor. So people saw all of that, and that brought more. So these people coming back from battle, they converted to Catholicism. And so the numbers were growing of Catholics in England. Not to mention all the immigrants were Catholic as well, like the Irish primarily. And so with the emancipation and the right, so now that Catholics could actually join the army, they could have professions. Before that, they couldn't have a profession. If they have over a certain amount of money, it was taken away from them and given to the Protestants. And in Ireland, they took estates away from the Irish and gave it to English. And so a lot of the aristocracy of Ireland are Protestants, And so all of this then culminated in a better life. And it looked like England was doing a lot better in terms of the Catholic Church. They had the oratorians, that had the wonderful children's choirs and schools and so forth. And, initially when they opened it up to the Catholics, they weren't allowed to have bishops. But the bishops then just served as apostolic ministers anyway, and were loyal to Rome. But it was very expensive for them because it fell on them to support Catholic schools. The Catholics began to build schools and orphanages and such, and look after the poor. And everything was going very well. And it was actually kind of like a mark of being cool to become a Catholic at one time, because before there was such virulent anti-Catholicism that if you even mention anything Catholic-wise, it was very much frowned upon. And so you get people coming in who are very aristocratic family people as well. And some of us, Canon Digby became a Catholic, and you wouldn't know who he was except he invented rowing at Oxford and Cambridge, where you have the famous, competition there. He invented that, but he also wrote a lot of romantic stories around Catholicism, in that it's called Gothic architecture, was identified as Catholic. You see, the church building on the continent was Romanesque at first, but it was later that they could build churches in England, and by then, so like you go to France and see some of these old Romanesque style churches, they didn't have much of that, because when they began to start building, Gothic had come in. And also the pealing of the bells. They would, if you go to Europe, a lot of times the bells are not so cool. But if you go to England, and I've seen so many dramas about people who are bell ringers and so forth in England. It's a big deal in England, and they have wonderful pealing of the bells, and so forth. And so it looked very good, and the church was very confident. And so when Dominic Barbary was a Passionist priest who was later named a saint, and he brought Cardinal Newman into the church, and that was a big deal, because that was the Oxford movement, and it was saying that the anti-Catholicism was still there, but it's far more tolerant towards Catholicism, and they began to take on Catholic tendencies in the Church of England. That's it. If you went time back to an Episcopalian church, it looked very Protestant in the early days in the United States or the colonies, but now it looks very Catholic. As a matter of fact, I think I wrote it down here. So 1851, they restored the hierarchy of the church, so we can have bishops. And the Anglican bishops started wearing mitres, the pointy hats, in 1865. Before they wore wigs and gowns, and now they're wearing mitres. And so it's Catholic stuff started to become cool. And a very famous person by the name of George Robertson was the viceroy of India. He converted to Catholicism, and he endowed a lot of Catholic churches with the money to build splendid Gothic buildings and so forth. And so it was looking very good. Let me look here. There's a Wilberforce. I don't know if you've heard of Wilberforce, but he was the one who argued for emancipation and in terms of slavery. He didn't become a Catholic, but his family did. His two sons became Catholics. And so let me find some more. Well, John Henry Newman is very famous. Of course, it's wonderful books he wrote, very learned. And, so the thing of being a Catholic, especially when it is a Don at Oxford, he had a lot of prestige. But also his writings are considered some of the best English writing in the entire use of the language. He was a skilled craftsman in terms of crafting the language, delicious English, however, pretty hard to understand as far as I can tell. He wrote the development of dogma, and it's so complicated. I went to seminary for all those years, and I still can't work my way through it. So it's like reading Dostoevsky. You give up, that's the only way to read it, is to just give up. And but anyway, there are a lot of folks like that who became well-known names. Oh, and I'd like to mention that the architect for the Parliament building, his name escaped me, but he was Catholic, and the Parliament building is very Catholic. His name is August Pugin. His name is Pugin. And if you go to the Parliament building, it is so Catholic, it's almost overwhelming. They have these great murals, and they're all of the great Catholic saints of England, And not only that, they're like funding the University of Glasgow is also very, very Gothic as well. What am I getting at? That the idea of being Catholic is almost becoming a romantic notion of the Middle Ages and wonderful Gothic architecture and chivalry and so forth. And that's the whole idea of Mary's dowry and everything. It's a chivalrous kind of sentiment. And so that was very attractive. And then out of that came two very famous writers. One was named G.K. Chesterton, who was a big man. He was so big that when he visited the United States, literally they had to rock his car back and forth to get him out of the car because he was so enormous. But he had an enormous brain as well. He was very, very, and he did, hi, Irene. Yes. Come in front of the camera so people can see you. So anyway, I think I'm messing this up. So anyway, Chesterton was fighting communism, but he argued with George Bernard Shaw, but he did it in such a humorous and gentle and Christian way that it was very witty. And another one who was also very instrumental in this was I can't remember his name. Oh, it's hell getting old. Have you ever given a speech and you start to panic and you can't find the name on the page? And I don't know which page it is. But anyway, um, I told you about it the last tape, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, everything was confident in the 1940s, up to the 1940s and even 50s. And then things started going wrong because the church universally was starting to have, his name is Belloc, it was his name. Um, started going badly in the United States. We had the things like Pope Paul VI put out Humanae Vitae. A lot of people were against that. And so we had a situation where people started dropping out of the church, and there was a lot of silliness going on. You don't remember the day, but I do, when priests were doing like these silly clown masses and all this stuff is just bizarre, you know. I mean, that's why our Angela, of EWTN, Mother Angelica, Mother Angelica had that big feud with the Archbishop, Cardinal Archbishop of Los Angeles because he was so liberal and so forth. And that was the day she said, "I'm not going to wear a modern habit again." And the next week she showed herself in this old-fashioned habit and wore it the rest of her life because she was sick and tired of liberals telling her how to live her faith, you know. So those things were going on, and communism was influencing the church, and the numbers began to decline. We're still in that spiral. We're losing lots of people. Even now, people are dropping out for a lot of reasons. Some of it was the writings in having to do with marital life and having children and so forth. And people said, "I don't want the Pope telling me what to do and how to live my life." And you've heard the expression, the Pope needs to stay out of our bedroom. I've heard that a lot in my day, you know. So that's unfortunate that it happened the same way in England. So now the church is trying to recover. They're still getting converts. The church is about a tenth of the population. England is about 60 million people. Catholics are about 10 million people. But many of them are coming inactive. And they say things like, well, you know, I don't go to church all the time, but I go once in a while. As if they're doing anybody a favor to go at all, you know, that kind of snooty attitude. And I see that a lot. I see that people are just too busy to go to church. Well, when they try to check into purgatory, they may have to explain why they were too busy, because purgatory is going to take a long time for them. And so, but anyway, that's where the church is now. It has a lot of political and I would say philosophical cachet amongst British now. That Catholics are highly respected. There are little little things that are still there. For example, the ambassador to the Holy See is not allowed to be a Catholic. Of all things, you know, there's a law against that you can't send a Catholic to Rome. You have to send, I don't know why, but you have to send a Protestant. So what they need to do is, you know, is convert one of those ambassadors, and they'll stop sending them. They'll stop saying the Catholics can't go. The other one is the Chancellor of England is not allowed to be a Catholic, and the Queen is not allowed to be a Catholic, or any monarch is not. I mean, that was a big issue in times when they were having trouble with Diana, and she was kind of spending time with Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and see the Spences had not only a lot of reprobates in their family, but also saints. They had a couple of Jesuits, Spencers, who actually canonized his saint. And so Diana was very favorable to the church, and they were very concerned. That was before the divorce at all, of course, but they were concerned she can't do that because she would be queen, and the queen is or king is the head of the Church of England, so it's just not possible. And so that law is still on the books. But other than that, it's pretty safe to be a Catholic in England. And I know some ladies in our parish who grew up in England, and I'm sure they're listening to this. I want to say they're really nice ladies. I really like them. And I have to tell you one about one of them. I won't use their names just in case. One of them makes the most wonderful bourbon balls, and I get those for Christmas. I'm hoping. If you're out there, dear, if you're out there, I'm looking forward to some more bourbon balls. Two of those will put you in the sack for a week. You know, they're very strong. And she did say once that she used double the recipe that was required, but you know you can't take it back once you pour it in there. And so they were really good. She makes wonderful stuff, wonderful stuff. But she grew up. One of the ladies is her dad was a Catholic. The other one, the mother was a Catholic, but they're both half Irish. And I tell them this joke, you know, I'm half Irish too. They say the Irish are witty, so but I'm only half Irish, so that makes me a half wit. Is that how it works? But that doesn't apply to the ladies. Okay, well, thank you for listening, and it's nice talking to you. And I'll try to have some more interesting stuff for you in the weeks to come. But I have to tell you about Cherie, our videographer. Cherie is going to the hospital for surgery, so we won't be seeing her for a while. So we'll pray for her that her surgery goes well. And also in the parish, Tom Fuhr died last Sunday, and it'd be really good to say a prayer for him, and masses will be offered for the repose of his soul. So thank you very much. We'll see you later.